I'll give another sort of medical one that I think is interesting. And I've been texting and interacting with Matt Walker a lot on this. Matt is a scientist. He wrote a book, Why We Sleep, and is about as credible as you can be within the world of sleep science.
He's the best. And he's a great human, fantastic human.
He's a great guy. Great guy. Has the most pleasing dulcet tones with that British accent and kind lilt in the voice.
The plus 10 IQ accent, basically.
Plus 10 or 20 IQ points with the accent. But his podcast is also excellent. And we can link to it in the show notes. But he did an episode on a class of sleep medication called DORAs. And DORA stands for dual orexin receptor antagonists. And the reason that DORAs became very interesting to me is that I have Alzheimer's in my family. And it's left, right, and center for me right now because I have 3 relatives currently diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Holy shit. And these are ApoE4 negative folks?
It includes ApoE4 negative folks. So we won't get too far into the genetics, but people who should not be, based on that particular parameter, should not be particularly inclined to Alzheimer's, nonetheless have Alzheimer's. And then there are, of course, people who have 3-4. I don't think any of them are ApoE3-3. I am ApoE3-4. So compared to a 3-3, that, at least as I understand it, would predispose me, say, 2.5 times.
You and my wife and Rhonda Patrick and Atia, too, actually is a 3-4.
Yeah, there you go.
All of you guys. I'm the only one that's not. Crazy.
In effect, to our current understanding, you want to mitigate the accumulation of 2 things. One is beta amyloid plaque, another is tangles that are created by tau proteins. And sleep is really imperative for this. And if you have sleep issues, as I have for decades, right, the onset insomnia, low percentage of deep sleep, etc., you're effectively unable to have your garbage service within the brain clear out these at a rate that offsets the accumulation.
And by the way, we don't know if these are causal, right? There's never been any conclusion whether these are causal. They're most likely the protective effects of something else gone awry. Do you agree with that?
I would say that based on our best understanding, if you can mitigate the accumulation of these things, there seems to be at the very least, delaying of the progression of these diseases. And there are different drugs, infusions like donanemab and so on, that are kind of predicated on that understanding of the mechanism. This is still early days in the world of Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
But it seems very defensible with our understanding currently that the less of this stuff you accumulate, the better off you are.
Do you follow Dale Bredesen's work, by the way?
I don't. Let's come back to that. But
okay.
Let me just quickly tie this up and say that an example of a Dora would be Balsamra. There are a handful of others, but I have taken, as I believe you have, well, actually, no, it was too strong for you.
I gave you some, dude.
Yeah, that's right. You gave me the Balsamra.
I gave you a bunch of Balsamra, and you were going to give me some other shit back, and you never gave me anything good.
Well, hold on. That's still pending. But let me come back. So you gave me the Balsamra, but I started using it. I was going to get it on a prescription. It's expensive as fuck.
Yeah, I paid a shit ton for it, and then I didn't use it.
Yeah, and I was like, all right, I'll take your Balsamra. But the trazodone, I got off of trazodone and switched as a sleep medication to, in this case, Balsamra, because it was literally down the street in an Uber at your house. Not recommending you use your friend's bootleg drugs, by the way. Talk to your doctor.
But we also have physicians that are looking at all our shit, so it's not a big deal for us.
I have been now on Balsamra for a few months as hopefully it's too strong to say it's a preventative strategy, but at least a delay strategy for potentially Alzheimer's and other associated neurodegenerative conditions. So I would encourage people, and I'll link to this in the show notes, to check out Matt Walker's podcast on this specifically.
You know what they did with Balsamra, where they tapped the spines of people that took it and they noticed there was less tau proteins in the spinal fluid?
Yeah, they cleared a lot more. They looked at animal models and then they looked at humans. And in that podcast episode also, Matt discusses data related to comparing, say, Balsamra, or I should say Doras, to Ambien.
Mm.
Right. And not all sleep medications are created equal. A lot of sleep medications effectively sedate you.
Right.
But in the case of Dora's, orexin, as I understand it, is a wakefulness. I think it's a hormone, but this is effectively inhibiting wakefulness as opposed to sedating.
Mm-hmm.
And by using that particular approach, you're able to create more naturalistic sleep. So it's preserving sleep architecture, increasing certain things like REM sleep. In any case, it's very interesting because as it stands, look, sure, like exercise for a natural release of clotho, watch your diet, blah, blah, blah. There are a handful of things here. Sleep, super critically important. If we're talking about, again, staving off, hopefully, neurodegenerative disease. But there really just aren't that many tools in the toolkit. So to come across some of this data via Matt Walker was very eye-opening to me.
That's awesome.
So that's also something that I'm looking at really closely.
I will say the scariest test I have done in my life was about 3 months ago. I went and had my blood work done and had the tau, the full on. Like you can check your blood now to see if you are producing, or we're always producing it, but if you are out of bounds, meaning you're above the norm in your production of these types of proteins. And if you are, it's like, 99% chance you're on the path to some form of dementia, right?
Yeah.
And did you do that test?
I have just done a whole battery of different tests.
Did you do the p-tau one though?
Yeah, I'm going to have all that stuff.
It's scary, dude. When you come hang with me, we'll have a drink or something.
I'm looking at all my results in probably 2 or 3 weeks because I have a few online batteries that I'm going to do assessments.
It is absolutely terrifying because the doctor was like, hey, do you want to do this? I have this available. And I was like, sure, go ahead. And then like 3 days afterwards, I'm like, I should look up what that test is all about. And I did. There's like 3 of them now that can detect these various proteins that are essentially, if you have elevated levels, like you're on your marching orders or you're heading towards some type of dementia. And I realized that, and I was like, wow, if this comes back positive, like I need to be, like this is an emergency situation where high intensity interval training every single morning for an hour, there's a lot of things that you have to get into. And it's a very frightening thing. It's a very frightening thing.
Yeah, it can be super frightening. And, there's certain other things that I think are just holistically good for my particular goals, cognitive, psychological, physical, like the ketogenic diet, right? I recently did a podcast with David Baszucki, the co-founder and CEO of Roblox. He and his wife have a foundation that is it is the largest funder of science related to metabolic therapies with a particular focus on ketogenic therapy. So I will be doing all of December in ketosis as an example.
Oh, that's amazing.
Just to keep that metabolic machinery humming, because I do think it's plausible that it could help long-term with a lot of the stuff we're talking about.
Tim, real quick, just to put a bow on this.
Dale,
yes. So the reason I like Dale's a scientist that studies all forms of dementia. And he has a book called The End of Alzheimer's. You probably heard of that book. It's pretty popular.
I've come across his name.
He's a little bit different than most of the scientists out there, where he believes that, Alzheimer's and these other dementias, they're not just a kind of one size fits all, one thing went wrong, but it can be a suite of different things that go wrong that lead you down this path.
Sure.
And so it's metabolic disorder, it's potential toxins. It's like, I think he's like the 4 major contributors to different various forms of dementia. And he's developed this protocol that can stabilize and even reverse a lot of this early cognitive decline if you catch it early enough. It's a little bit of like throwing the whole kitchen sink at it because it's everything. And he's not quite sure exactly what is doing the fix here, but it's fascinating, the research that he's done. I highly recommend 2 things that stood out to me that he recommends is, 1, getting this p-tau test done on the blood front, and then also recommends the ketogenic diet. He thinks ketogenic diet is huge for people, and he's seen that alone stabilize people from mental decline. And not that they're not eventually going to get it.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, do you want to go into full decline within 5 years, or do you want that to be 15 years, right? And so that's kind of what his lab's focused on.
Cool. Yeah, I'll check him out. I mean, I've seen, not that this is a necessarily sustainable or scalable approach. But with some of my relatives with Alzheimer's, where it's pretty progressed, and they tend to give, one-word answers or get confused and give the wrong answer to questions, giving them, say, 35 milliliters of exogenous ketones. So they're not in ketosis. They're following the terrible diet they've always followed, but give them 35 milliliters of kind of high octane exogenous ketones before going for a walk. And within 30 minutes, they're speaking in full sentences.
It's wild.
You see some really wild, temporary, but nonetheless very interesting transformations, which comes back to what you said about metabolic syndrome. And there are good reasons why some folks refer to Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes.
100%. And that's what he says in his book. He's like, that is definitely a contributor.
Yep.
Excess glucose levels and all the downstream inflammation effects that come from that. It's just bad news bears, as you like to say. That's Tim Ferriss.
Bad news bears.